It was an unusually warm morning in downtown Los Angeles, and the marble steps of the U.S. District Court buzzed with reporters and curious onlookers. Cameras flashed, voices murmured, and all eyes were locked on a single man walking up the steps, a man who had punched his way into the hearts of millions on screen. Sylvester Stallone, the legendary actor, wasn't here to promote a new movie. No, today he was on trial. The charge? Contempt of court. And the reason? A simple silver cross necklace hanging around his neck. Inside the courtroom, the air grew tense. Stallone, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, took his place at the defendant's table. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker of steel behind his eyes, an unyielding spirit, not unlike the characters he had portrayed over decades. Judge Beatrice Hensley, a stern woman in her 60s with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, adjusted her glasses and eyed Stallone with disapproval. "Mr. Stallone," she said, her voice cold as marble. "I instructed all parties to adhere to the courtroom dress code. Religious symbols, especially those displayed so prominently, are not permitted. Yet here you are, defying a direct order." Stallone leaned slightly forward, the muscles in his jaw flexing. "Your Honor," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble, "I'm wearing this cross to honor my mother. She gave it to me before she passed away. It's not just jewelry, it's part of who I am." The courtroom shifted with quiet whispers. Even the bailiff, a man who had seen his fair share of courtroom theatrics, seemed momentarily intrigued. Judge Hensley wasn't moved. She tapped her gavel twice. "Personal sentiment doesn't exempt you from the rules. I am imposing a fine of $50,000 for contempt of court." A ripple of shock coursed through the room. 50 grand? For a necklace? Stallone's face was unreadable, but something about the way he folded his hands on the table suggested this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the session adjourned, reporters swarmed outside, hurling questions. "Mr. Stallone, will you pay the fine? Is this religious discrimination? Do you plan to appeal?" Stallone paused on the courthouse steps. His brown eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the crowd. Then, with the same quiet intensity that made Rocky Balboa an icon, he delivered a line that would light up the internet within hours. "I'm no lawyer," he said, "but I know a thing or two about fighting. And I'm not backing down." The days that followed were a media firestorm. News outlets debated whether Stallone's fine was an overreach or a necessary enforcement of court decorum. Social media exploded with hashtags like #FreeTheCross and #StalloneVersusSystem. Late-night comedians had a field day, but beneath the jokes and headlines, a more serious question brewed: had the court overstepped its constitutional bounds? The answer, as it turned out, wasn't going to come from a high-profile legal team. No, Stallone had another plan, one that no one saw coming. 1 week after the fine was issued, Stallone filed a pro se motion, a legal document representing himself without an attorney. And it wasn't just a simple appeal. It was a 600-page legal argument challenging the fine on First Amendment grounds. The media had a collective meltdown. Wait, one anchor on a primetime legal show stammered. "Are we saying that Sylvester Stallone, the man who gave us Yo, Adrian, is now crafting complex constitutional arguments?" Apparently, yes. And the motion wasn't just legal fluff. Legal scholars began poring over the document only to find it meticulously researched and brilliantly argued. Citing landmark cases like Tinker versus Des Moines and West Virginia versus Barnett, Stallone contended that his cross necklace was protected free expression and the court's attempt to suppress it was a blatant violation of his rights. "Most lawyers wouldn't think to cite Justice Jackson's dissent in Gobitis," said Professor Dana Keegan, a constitutional law expert at Yale. Yet here it is clear as day, footnoted and cross-referenced. The big question on everyone's mind: where did Stallone learn this stuff? The day the motion hit the court's docket, Judge Hensley's chambers buzzed with disbelief. She skimmed through the opening pages, expecting amateur legal ramblings, but what she found was precise, razor-sharp legal reasoning. This can't be right," she muttered, adjusting her glasses. He cited Sherbert versus Werner in reference to religious burdens? Indeed, he had. Stallone's motion wasn't just well-written, it was airtight. By the time the next hearing rolled around, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, legal analysts, even law students crammed into every available seat. The internet had dubbed the event Rocky V. The system and the world was eager for round 2. When Sylvester Stallone entered, he wasn't flanked by high-powered attorneys. He stood alone, an icon in the spotlight. But this time, there was something different. His usual quiet intensity was accompanied by a confident gleam in his eye. He was ready for a fight. Judge Hensley wasted no time. "Mr. Stallone," she began, her tone clipped, "I've reviewed your motion. It is impressive. However, I must ask, did you receive assistance from any legal counsel? Stallone smiled faintly. No, Your Honor. I wrote every word myself. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. But how she pressed, the disbelief evident in her voice. You're an actor, not a lawyer. Stallone leaned toward the microphone. You see, Your Honor, when I was younger, before Rocky, I couldn't afford acting classes. So, I spent hours at the public library teaching myself everything I could: history, philosophy, and yes, law. The courtroom went silent. I figured, he continued, his voice smooth but deliberate, if I was going to tell stories about fighters and underdogs, I needed to understand how the world tries to knock people down and how they fight back. Judge Hensley tried to maintain her composure. And you believe this gives you the legal authority to challenge my ruling? With all due respect, Your Honor, Stallone replied, the Constitution gives me that authority. His words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Over the next hour, Stallone dissected the judge's ruling with a precision that left even seasoned lawyers stunned. Under Tinker versus Des Moines, he argued, the Supreme Court ruled that students do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. I contend that no citizen, celebrity or otherwise, sheds their First Amendment rights upon entering your courtroom. Judge Hensley arched an eyebrow. And yet, Mr. Stallone, decorum is a foundational principle of the judiciary. I respect decorum, Your Honor, Stallone countered. But when decorum infringes on personal freedom, we've crossed a dangerous line. My cross necklace didn't disrupt proceedings. It's not a political statement. It's a symbol of faith and family protected under the Free Exercise Clause. The judge was silent for a beat too long, a sign to courtroom observers that Stallone was landing punches. And, he added, leaning back slightly, if this court's decision is allowed to stand, what happens next? Will you fine a Muslim woman for wearing a hijab? A Jewish man for his yarmulke? This is not just about me. It's about the rights of all Americans. A collective gasp swept through the room. Judge Hensley steepled her fingers. You've made a compelling argument, Mr. Stallone. But compelling doesn't always mean correct. Why should this court overturn its own ruling? Stallone's answer was simple and devastating. Because no court, he said softly, is above the Constitution. Part 5, a knockout victory. For the next 2 weeks, the nation was captivated. News channels replayed Stallone's courtroom speech on loop. Legal blogs broke down his arguments point by point, many admitting grudgingly that he had a case. Then, in a move that no one saw coming, civil rights organizations filed amicus briefs supporting Stallone's position. The ACLU, the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, even former Supreme Court clerks, joined the fray. Public opinion shifted. What began as an obscure courtroom dispute had morphed into a national conversation about religious freedom and the limits of judicial authority. When the ruling finally came down, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Judge Hensley, her usual stern demeanor softened just a fraction, read from the bench. After careful reconsideration, this court finds that Mr. Stallone's expression of religious belief manifested by wearing a cross necklace falls squarely within the protections of the First Amendment. The gavel came down. Fine revoked. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Stallone, ever the understated fighter, simply nodded in gratitude. But outside, when reporters swarmed him with questions, he delivered the perfect final blow. Always stand up for your rights, he said, flashing a rare smile. Because whether you're in a boxing ring or a courtroom, you never stop fighting.